All right, we got a Vox AC30 hand wired here that had been redone by a well-respected modder, and I'll just say that for right now. Before we get to the meat of this video, I just want to point out that this panel is really dusty, and that in itself is not a huge deal. I can clean it off; it'll clean up nicely. But because this amp sits with the controls facing up, all that dust also goes down into the input jacks. Over time, that dust can even get into the switches. So, the world is full of dusting supplies. Even just one of those little static plastic things that looks like something you win at a fair. Just run over your amps once a week, once a month, whatever. Swiffers, whatever. Try to keep the dust off your amps in general, but especially input jacks. All right, now to the meat of this video. I think I may have to change the name of this channel to Lyle's a Great Big Jerk about other people's work. It just seems like it the past couple of days, and I don't mean to be that guy. The guy who did this work, whom I will not name, has a great reputation. And this amp work was done in 2013. And the owner asked me to just take a look, make sure everything was still going strong. And I said, no problem, expecting that I might say, oh, the output tubes have drifted, we need to change those out. Or, jacks needed tightening, some pots needed cleaning, this stuff that happens. But instead, I've got to be a jerk again. The guy signed this chassis. I have covered it in blue tape because I just don't want to buy that internet headache of saying X person made a mistake and then it becomes a thing. I mentioned Dave's sound in a video the other day and instantly, got defenders, even though I've seen just utter nightmare work from that company. So I'm just not going to get into it on this. I'm just going to say that someone out there who works on a lot of AC30s did this. And at first glance, it's got a Mercury choke. It's got the original power transformer. It's got a Mercury output transformer. It's the Woden model. So you'd think everything's good so far. The planter's nuts are mine. That's actually empty, sadly. I wish I had some right now. But that can is a great thing to prop open chassis and put things that get hot on. Because if anything bad happens to that, I'll just have to go out and get another. Let me flip this around and show you why I am a jerk. Let's start with the other side of that output transformer connection. All right, the amp has 4 mounting locations for the original output transformer hardware, and they are these nuts which have been welded into the chassis. And the guy who did this work tried to reuse them, and he reused 2 of them. And the other 2 didn't quite line up, but just barely. And he's got these washers at this severe angle and the screws at an angle as well. So it doesn't matter if it has nylock nuts. That's just terrible. When I install the Mercury transformer in here, and I do it a lot, I make 4 new holes just slightly offset from the originals, making sure that my new hardware will not contact these old rings, because you cannot do this, and this is why. That is not good. Let me show you one other thing about this output transformer. All right, someone's going to think I'm being real nitpicky, but when you pay to have work done, you need to have it done right. This is the 16 ohm secondary on the Mercury Magnetics Woden transformer. And the 8 ohm, this green one, like most transformers, has a wire which goes into the transformer and is tied to a wind in there. On this one, they actually bring, like the Wodens did, they bring the actual copper wire from the wind out, and it's 2 strands. It's a very heavy-duty transformer, and Mercury did a great job copying it. But it has 2 strands of pretty heavy gauge, probably 18 gauge copper wire, which has that red enamel coating. And it's really tough to solder to. You got to get that coating off and really heat things up. And this is just pretty much tack soldered. There's not any mechanical strength to it. And the switch that Vox used is not that physically strong. So I give this a fail in terms of long-term reliability and just caring. And is that nitpicky? Well, you tell me. If you have someone do this work, I think it should be done right. And on to the other stuff. All right, the majority of the components on the board are stock. He changed out the capacitors, the filter caps for F and T's, which I do as well. No problem there, and no problem with how he installed them. The major coupling caps, he's got SOZOs in. I don't use SOZOs on these if I have any other option because they are physically large and they barely fit. But, they do sound fine and it works just fine. He replaces ceramic disc caps with silver micas. Now, aside from the fact that the JMIs used mostly ceramic disc caps and ceramic dog bone caps, these silver micas are the generic SMs which develop problems. There's only the two of them in the amp. It's not a huge thing, but another place that I don't like the sound of them compared to ceramic in a Vox. Most of the stuff in here is still stock, including a lot of stuff I changed, but I'm not going to get into that. All right, here's one of the SOZOs, which has been burned to hell. That's not good. Here, this is weird to me. These are the grid stoppers for the output tubes. Now, on the early hand-wired AC30 models, those grid stoppers were mounted here on this board, and as are these. Later, Vox moved those grid stoppers to pin 2 of each EL84 because there's a lot more stability having the grid stopper right there at the tube socket. The original ones that would have been here were 1.5K. They have been changed to 1.6K, which is no real difference whatsoever. And I think that is just a terrible, sloppy solder job. And there's a bit of excess stuck here. It's just really weird to me. And F&T 16 microfarads there. I use the 22s because they're physically a little bit smaller and it's easier to get into this space. And you're not going to hear any difference between a 22 and a 16. But that's neither here nor there. This is weird. Not only is it strange to change out the 1.5Ks for 1.6Ks, and not only is that a sloppy soldering job, but it is much, much better to move those directly to pins 2 on each output tube. Now, speaking of which, I don't know whether he did this or just left the factory ones, but this series, like most Voxes and people copying Voxes, has half-watt 100-ohm screen grid resistors, which is just a recipe for short output tube life. So those really should be increased. Brian May's amps use 270. 470 is used in the custom series. I much prefer a 1K there. Either way, it needs to be more than 100. I would say 470 at the minimum because it's a very tough life for EL84s in these amps. They're biased on the hot side. It should be idling 13-14 watts per tube. And it's cathode bias. There's a lot of current. And those screens take a beating. And it is being operated right at the maximum plate voltage for healthy EL84 life. So everything you can do to make the screen easier, better. And that includes having the grid stoppers on pin 2 so there's no oscillation, because you have something that's drawing a lot of current already and you get some oscillation and it can be game over. It's not just noise, it can actually give you a premature output tube death. So I need to talk to the owner and see what of these changes he approves and one other thing, because I'll use this video to show him. And this is not any criticism of the guy who did this work, because I don't know what client he did this work for in 2013, or what that client's budget was. Maybe the guy who did this work made the same recommendation that I'm going to make, and the person declined it for reasons of cost. And this is more a criticism of Vox, which I have made before, but I'll make it again because it continues to bother me. This is the hand-wired amp. This is supposed to be their flagship thing. And they use these cheap 16mm pots like you'd find in a guitar pedal. They're quarter-watt pots. They have not very great tapers. They're not very reliable. The press-on knobs on the other side are this grayish beige plastic that just has no luster. It looks cheap because they are cheap. And the amp's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pots. 6 pots. 6. Ha 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 ha. 6. 6 pots. Really high quality pots for like $2, $3 each. So it would not break the bank to upgrade them. You need to get new knobs. So, $2 pots, $1 knobs, and a little bit of labor to rewire them properly. And you'd have an amp that feels and sounds and lasts a lot better. So I will make that option available to the owner while I have the amp. And I will get a Sozo to replace this damaged one here. And I will replace these silver micas, these generic silver micas, with some capacitors which will not develop leakage. Either my preferred Vichy ceramics, or maybe I'll get some of the good silver micas in here. I think the ceramic is the better sound, but any cap that doesn't leak is a better cap than one that does. And these burns just irritate me. These grid stoppers are going to get moved to pin to the output tubes regardless, and I'll clean up some of those solder drips that are in there just because it irks me so. So once again, I've had to be a jerk about someone else's work, and I'm sorry. I don't set out to do this. I want to find nothing but good things to say. I want to be pleasantly surprised. So please, people, someone send me a Sir. Someone send me a Friedman. Someone send me a Germino or a Fuchs. I need an amp where I could say, hey, it needed a new preamp tube, or hey, I cleaned the pot, or hey, there was nothing wrong with it. Thanks for letting me play your amp, mister.